Good evening. Welcome to the Lessons of Vietnam. This is Bill Dixon with the Lessons of Vietnam, brought to you tonight. And I wanted to, you notice a little difference here. I just forgot to shave a few times here. I just wanted to start out by saying that I'm sorry about the last show. Joe Harsh was going to do the show for me because I was out of town. Joe has a pacemaker and his heart skipped a few beats, so they put him in the hospital. And so he was unavailable for the show because of that. Then we come to find out that he was in not too long ago for a tune-up on his pacemaker, and evidently they forgot to hook it back up because they went back in to see what the problem was, and they realized there was a wire loose or something. Anyway, he's doing fine now, and he's back. I was hoping I was going to get back in time. My plane was about an hour late leaving New York. Then I got here. They couldn't find my luggage for a while. So then I got on 540, and it was gridlocked. But by then, it was already too late to get here because it was 8 o'clock by then. Anyway, but the show tonight is vocabulary, the way we said things. You got 19, 20, 22-year-old guys mostly had their own unique language. Vietnam itself has if hundreds, if not thousands, different dialects and languages there. They were controlled by the French for a good part of their history. The Chinese were there, the Japanese were there, and then the Vietnamese languages and some of the other different ethnic groups had their own language, and it's all kind of got put together in French, Japanese, Chinese, English. It was kind of a mismatch there, but then we added to that the young American slang, and we're going to go over a few of those tonight. And I want to give you, as we go through it, I'm going to make comments and read it to you. You can read some of the PowerPoint yourself. But it's a total bastardization, I guess you want to call it, of the French and English and Vietnamese mostly, all put together. Kind of give you an idea. The first word we have on here is, okay, let's go ahead and pass on. All right, it's Grunt. Grunt was the guy that got out there, and the reason they called him a grunt because he did a lot of grunting. His pack with everything in it probably weighed close to 100 pounds, some more and some less, depending on what he was going to do. That was usually his MOS, military occupational specialty, was 11 Bravo, 11B, or 11 Bullet Stopper, basically the infantry guy, and had different variations to that. So the Grunt did most of the walking all over Vietnam, crawling and walking through water and everything else. How you differentiate sometimes between Vietnam-era veterans and Vietnam veterans, boots on the ground. If you were in Vietnam and you walked on the ground at all, you had boots on the ground and qualified for the Vietnam service. But you had people who were off the coast of Vietnam on Navy ships who also qualified for Navy service, and you had people who flew over Vietnam, never set foot necessarily on Vietnam soil, but were considered full Vietnamese or full Vietnam veterans. Vietnam era, that's the men and women who served either in Germany, where I tried to get, or back in the United States, or wherever they sent them. It's amazing. It's kind of the luck of the draw, I guess, or unlucky of the draw. A lot of people spent their entire career during that period of time and never got to Vietnam. And some people never went any place but Vietnam then for their tour of duty. So Vietnam era covers anybody doing that from 1959 to about 1975 that was in the military, depending on what, whatever job they were. REMPs, Rear Echelon Mother FUs, and I'm going to let it go at that. Those were the guys who were back in the base camps. Now, depending on where you were, and I mean, I was at Long Binh, which was a major base. I was a REMP. Even though I went out with the 9th Infantry guys, I was basically still a REMP. it takes about 10 soldiers with supply, maintenance, medics, company clerks, payroll people to make sure that one grunt or one soldier out in the field got taken care of and got his pay and got his mail and got bullets to use and so forth. So 1 out of 10 REMPs made sure that as much as they could, that the fighting soldier who went out there and really put the boots on the ground and got out there. Another word for that was in the rear with the gear. That was back because that's where all the gear was stored and so forth. You could have been a base camp like Long Binh, Cam Ranh Bay, Da Nang, which were large base camps. It was 55,000 troops at Long Binh. It was like a city into itself. Or you could have been a company clerk in a base camp out in the middle, surrounded by jungles and so forth. The next thing we're going to talk about is everybody knows what a brown noser was. The military had people who had it as a nice career. And crud. You would not believe if you were out in the jungles and so forth, the crud, fungi, and everything else would grow. That's one of the reasons that most people who out in the jungle in any period of time were out didn't wear underwear, because you'd end up with rashes, which would end up as all kinds of different interesting infections and so forth. You wanted to make sure that you kept your feet dry, clean socks and so forth. And of course, the back in the world, that's an easy one. That was getting back home. Anytime we talked about the United States or America or whatever, it was basically when I get back to the world or what's going on back in the world. The word in country was basically anywhere in Vietnam. How long you been in country? Where in country were you? That's the question we usually ask today is what year were you in Vietnam and where were you in country and what was your job? So those kind of give you an idea of those. And the next one, kind of lighten things up a little bit, is number 10. That was the Vietnamese word for you ain't doing right. If they come up and try to sell you something or try to get something from me and you didn't buy it or go along with it, you were number 10. Now, if you're really bad, you were number 10,000. I mean, you were just about as low as you can get. And, of course, a bastardization of bucoup means a lot of many. You were, many soldiers in Vietnam were number 10. And, of course, if you're really crazy, you were Dinky Dow. Mama San used to call me Dinky Dow all the time, and along with other things. And if you were Boku Dinky Dow, that means you were totally crazy. You didn't have a chance in the world. You were probably too dumb to even come out of the monsoons. Sin Loy was the next one. That's Vietnamese for sorry about that or tough shit, whichever way you want to look at it. Didi or Didi Mao. Sometimes you were moving along and Mama San, Papa San was herding goats or cows or whatever, just not getting in a hurry. And you go, Didi Mao, get on with it, hurry up, basically just move out. Dung Lai. Now, if you got someone coming towards you and you said stop, and they didn't understand Vietnamese, you could say stop, 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 and but if you haul a dung law, they know what you were talking about. In other words, stop or halt. Don't come any farther. TT is somebody that's real small. Baby sons were TT. Bic or Biet. That was Vietnamese for I understand. And the next one we're going to talk about is C rations or C's. And these were interesting. There were some of them that wasn't too bad. And then some of them were pretty bad. It had things like you can see in the picture there. It had probably hard crackers. It may have had cheese, toilet paper, some cigarettes, matches, a little bit of coffee, and salt and pepper, a little bit all just about anything you would need. The only problem was it was packaged for World War II in Korea. We kind of got the leftovers. There was one that was called Ham and Mothers, and And even the Vietnamese kids didn't like those. I mean, they were pretty bad. I mean, listen, I grew up here in the South, and I love ham and lima beans, but ham and lima beans in sea rations, well, as I like to say, that gag 'em maggot. That's how bad they were. Sometimes what you would have to do, a good sergeant would take a case of sea rations out and turn them upside down and say, okay, you guys, pick your sea rations. And you just had to pick up the sea rations that were there. You didn't know what they were until you got them. And you heard a guy start moaning and groaning. You know, he got ham and limas and already started to want to trade and so forth. The P-38, that's probably the most valuable tool that military had as far as I'm concerned. I still got mine, for what I use for opening sea rations. I use it today for opening cans. Sometimes my wife can't get the can open to work or whatever. But the P-38, now, you hear a lot of military people use the word TDY. That's temporary duty. Sometimes people will be sent to Vietnam from back in the country, back in the world, temporary duty for a while there, or they may be in Vietnam and sent from one part of Vietnam to another part of Vietnam as TDY. And deep six, well, that's to get rid of something. You're going to deep six it. You come up with a good idea and nobody likes it, you deep six it. FUBAR, you can probably relate to that one, most of you. That's FU beyond repair or really screwed up. I mean, I've seen a lot of things even today that you could put FUBAR on. FM, FU magic. Sometimes you wouldn't get things to work, and you call somebody in and say, okay, help me fix this, and all of a sudden it just worked. You have no way, you don't know who that was that came in and made it work. Next thing is, now, I got short time here, but I'm going to skip that one, just the word short time, and let's go short. That's better. Short time actually most of the time meant something else, and I'll go into that in a minute. But you counted off the days that you had or before you came home, and you got down to, I would say 30 days, you would start considering yourself short. And then within 2 weeks, you were probably really short. You would be getting down to, and you got down to 3 days, you'd be a 3-digit midget. You see a picture here of a short timer's calendar. You just kind of color it in as you go for each days. We had some interesting short time calendars. I had one of, it looked like the naked woman that's on the back of mud flaps on trucks sometimes. That silhouette there, and you just kind of fill it in as you went. But you got to be really, really careful when you got short. The tour of your time there was called Tour of Duty. Now, Tour of Duty was, in fact, I made a TV series out of it, Tour of Duty. That's how long you were in Vietnam. The Army guys were there, and the Navy and Air Force guys were there. Generally served 12 months. The Marines, they served 13 months, and I've got my own reasons why the Marines served an extra month, but I won't go into that because they don't like to hear that. But 12 months was a normal tour of duty. Some people serve a little bit less. Some people serve more. You could extend your tour for whatever reasons. 364 days in a wake up. The day you arrived in Vietnam, you could say that you had only 364 days in a wake up that came home. Of course, I wouldn't tell anybody that because they definitely knew you were a new guy. And let's go back to what I mentioned a while ago, short time. Short time is you'd be walking down the streets, or if you went into Benoit, where I was stationed right out close by, or into the towns and so forth, and the girls would come out and invite you for a short time. That's a brief time you spend with a prostitute. Or boom boom, that's having sex. I remember the first time I ever went into Benoit. A little kid came up to me. He couldn't have been 6 years old, but he spoke pretty good English. Of course, he only had a certain sentence. He had rehearsed a whole lot. That was, you boom boom my mother, she's a virgin. And that's what boom boom means in general vernacular of Vietnam. Now let's talk about the guys we were fighting. The NVA, or North Vietnamese Army, a lot of people look at Vietnam and go, oh, y'all, they fought with guerrillas and they were farmers by day and so forth, and they had crude weapons. Well, that's not quite the way it really was. The NVA, North Vietnamese Army, they had uniforms, they had as good equipment as we did, and most of the time, they even had tanks, they had MiGs, they had artillery. They were mostly in the northern part of South Vietnam, and the southern part of Vietnam were the Viet Cong, the Vietnamese communists, who were nationalists or Vietnamese communists. A lot of them who were not communists, but were part of the Viet Cong because they were nationalists, and they were the guerrillas. And initially, they didn't have a whole lot of weapons, but as the Ho Chi Minh Trail came along, they definitely started having just about as good equipment as the NVA and so forth. And Dink or Gook, that was a slang we used. It kind of dehumanized them a little bit, so when you were shooting at them, it was not like you were shooting at John or whatever. You were shooting a Dink or a Gook. I mean, you wouldn't go out there and go deer hunting and go, I'm going to go out and see if I can find Bambi today. No, that wouldn't exactly go over too well either. So Dink or Gook, that was the slang. You had to have a lot of respect for the enemy because they were well trained and they were good fighters. So we call them Charlie, Chuck, or Sir Charles. Calling them a name with showing them some respect. Now the AK-47 or AK or Kalashnikov, that was the rifle that most of the communists used. It wasn't really a good weapon to aim with. You just kind of sprayed out a whole lot of fire. But it was a weapon that they could use because what I've been told is you could dig a hole, put an AK-47 loaded in it, put dirt back on it, dig it up a year later, and still fire. And you couldn't do that with the M16 because it would clog up on a rainy day. But the AK-47, I fired one. It has a pretty good kick to it, but like I said, it's very hard to aim. You can see the long clip in there that had more firepower. And one of the things I was always scared about was that 122 millimeter rocket. It's amazing to me. Those things are about 6 feet tall, and you got a 5'2" Vietnamese walking down the Ho Chi Minh Trail carrying that on his back and so forth. But they had those things set up. They could take sticks or whatever and put it together into a tripod, set one up, and set it off. And they've made a pretty good mess when they hit. Punji stakes. Now, punji stakes kind of grew as they went. Originally, they were you dig a hole. You put either take bamboo, you put it in the fire a little bit, which makes it hard. You put a notch on it, dip that in human waste so that it would cause an infection, and you put it down in the hole. Now, the idea was that the soldier, American soldier, would walk along, or his allies would walk along and step in the punji stick, and it would come up through his boots. Well, then the Americans started putting metal plates in the sole of the shoes. So what the Viet Cong started doing then was they dug a hole and they put the punji stick sticking to the side. And the idea was then when you stepped in the hole, your first response would be to jerk your leg back. The only trouble is when you jerk your leg back, those two punji sticks were sticking in and got you in the leg that way. Now, the idea was sometimes it was better to wound a soldier than it was to kill him. If you had a soldier that got killed, they could call in for a Medevac helicopter and go on patrol. But if you got a guy wounded, you got to leave the medic with him. You got to leave somebody to guard the medic. And sometimes if you have a small group, you can't go on patrol. So the punji sticks were not only psychologically pretty bad, but it also served a great purpose that way. Now, de-roast. Everybody looked for that date. That was the date you got to come home. When you got there, well, you knew what your de-roast date was, but what you're really looking for is your ETS. That's the actual date for departure from Vietnam. You always look for that. And then if you got really lucky, you got that Freedom Bird. Braniff Airlines or American Airlines, who had round-eye stewardesses and flight service, drinks, and so forth to get you to come home. That was great. I went to Vietnam in a military plane. A lot of the guys flew the regular airplanes over to Vietnam, and that's where they picked up the people coming home and come back. I'll never forget the day that when the plane left Saigon, I'm sitting there going, are they going to make this thing turn around? Are they going to make this? And then the pilot finally said, we're out of Vietnamese airspace, and I think you could. Everybody on the plane just went, because we knew the chances are not going back. Civvies, that's basically what it says. If you were off duty, and most of us didn't wear them, we just wore our regular military clothes, but you could, mama, your wife, or whoever, your girlfriend, send you some civilian clothes that you could wear civilian clothes if you're off duty, which wouldn't that often, and so forth. And, of course, the infamous Jody. Now, all during basic training, we used to sing songs to Jody, and they were pretty nasty songs to Jody. But Jody was always the guy that didn't come to Vietnam, never got into the service. He was the guy back home that was dating your girlfriend or dating your wife or whatever. And so sometimes Jody wrote his mean head up when a guy got his Dear John letter from home because Jody got in there. AWOL, of course, is just what it says, absent without leave. You could go, sometimes you had guys that go on R&R, rest and relaxation. They could go to Bangkok or whatever, and they were late coming back. They were absent without leave because they may come back a day late and so forth. Now, we kept things pretty easy over there. If you were 18 and above, you were a male, you were called Papasan. If you were 18 and above and you were a woman, you were called Mama-san. Everybody else kind of fit in the category of baby-son. So that's how we kept things interesting out there. Now, of course, when you went into town or you could be in a firefight, the next thing you know, some kids are coming up trying to sell you a Coca-Cola most of the time, or some beer, Butterbar, or some people call it Tiger Piss. That was the beer, and they said it had formaldehyde in it. Today, it's they've changed the formula a little bit. I guess it took the formaldehyde out. If you buy a beer over in Vietnam today, instead of 33 beer, it's 333 beer, but it's the same stuff. Nuke Mom is something they eat on just about everything. It's a fish sauce, and oh God, it stinks. It's basically rotten fermented fish they put on everything they eat just about, and you could smell it for miles away. If the bad guys, you could sometimes smell them because the Nuke Mom was so strong. And then betel nut, that's a mild narcotic that you see people all over the Vietnams chewing. You could always tell when they chewed the betel nut. It made their teeth turn black and the gums recede. You could smile like the Mama-san there. She could smile, and she didn't have any gums at all. It's either jawbone and black teeth. It was pretty bad looking. When you went into town, the bar girls there would always go up to you and go, "You buy me Saigon tea?" And what that was, their idea was to get you to buy them a drink and, of course, buy yourself a drink. Now, if they drank beer or Butterbar, while they were talking to the soldier, trying to get as much money out of the soldier as they could, they'd be so drunk they couldn't move. So what they did was they drank Saigon tea. It was basically a colored water or tea, and they'd get you to buy them a tea, and then when you quit buying them tea, they'd go sit with another soldier and talk to him and get him to buy them Saigon tea while he was drinking. So that's where the word Saigon tea came from. Dog tags, they're not for dogs. Those were the identification that you wore around your neck. We used to tape ours together before the little rubber pieces now so they wouldn't bang around. I found that after I got back. I went all the way through Vietnam with the wrong blood type on my dog tags. But usually they had your full name, your service number, your blood type, and quite often your religion that you had, so that if you were wounded real bad and they didn't know who you were, if you were a new guy and you just got to country and all of a sudden you got your head blown off doing a artillery round or something and nobody knew who you were, they could use your dog tags, if they were lucky, to figure out who you were and so forth. Now, DD-214. DD-214 is very important even today. that's the government's official record that shows your service in Vietnam, the medals that you may have won, your time of duty, and so forth. And anybody that's talking to you about Vietnam, if you want to make sure they're a Vietnam veteran, ask to see their DD-214. Now, you may get the old story, well, I can't tell you, I can show you my DD-214, but it doesn't have my service on it because everything I did was so secret on it. And let me tell you, they're not Vietnam vets. If they served, it's something on that DD-214 that says they're served. But I've had people all the time say, well, mine was a secret unit and didn't show up on their DD-214. Listen, they also say you're a Oceanside villa in Arizona. MOS, as I mentioned a while ago, military occupational specialty. SOP, you use it probably in your work today, standard operating procedures. Now, the USO, the United Service Organization, I never saw one, but I knew they were in Vietnam. It's a great organization, and the thing about it is it actually got started here in North Carolina back during World War II. But the airport, the RDU airport here in Raleigh, has a great USO facilities out there. When you have soldiers who are traveling from anywhere to anywhere else, can always stop at a USO and know they can get a good meal, a place to sleep if necessary, somebody to talk to, TV to watch, or books to read, or whatever. And the RDU USO organization serves thousands of troops each month. There's a lot of troops come through here from they call them Hollywood Marines from California going to Camp Lejeune. The Hollywood Marines come through there. Now, an awesome thing was Puff the Magic Dragon. They would take a Douglas A-47 and they put Gatling guns in there. That's the guns that shoot real quick, a lot of bullets. I forgot how many per minute they do, but they shoot a lot of bullets. They cut trees down. And you could call in a Puff the Magic Dragon, and not many people are going to stand up and shoot back at them. I don't think there's too many of them that were shot down by a guy with a rifle or whatever, because you got to be crazy to stand out there when they're shooting, because it was awesome, especially with the tracers and so forth. Sometimes you read books or hear stories about Vietnam. They will mention Arclight. That's a code name for the B-52 strikes, where they were dropping bombs off the bombs, 500-pound, 1,000-pound, 2,000-pound bombs. How the Vietnamese communists survived being down in their tunnels when they were dropping these, and an Arclight drop was just, I can't even mention just how much it was. Now, next thing we're going to talk about is snafu. You're probably familiar with that one too, because a lot of the words that we used back then we're using today. Situation, normal, all, FU, up. I see that all the time. BFD, big FU deal. Big deal. We just had to add the FU to it. A cluster. I've used that quite a bit, especially something that the government has put together, a cluster FU or mass confusion, any way you look at it. A circle jerk, right or left, that's organization confusion. That's when you get together and organize things and you're still confused. An FNG, that's the new guy. FU, new guy, that's the guy that first gets the country. Everybody tries to stay away from him because he's new, he doesn't know what he's doing, he's liable to get you killed in himself. So everybody tried to stay away from him. FTA, that was used, oh my God, I heard that so many times. FU, the Army. I heard officers say that, enlisted men, it was such a popular phrase. Diligo. Does it look like I give a FU? Okay. Used that one a few times. Deep shit. Man, you got out there and you got ambushed and you were out there surrounded by more guys of them than there were you. You were in deep shit. But put it bluntly. FUBAR. We mentioned that up a while ago. It's just FU up beyond all reason. There's no reason why it should ever be that bad. Now, Willie Pete. Willie Pete was a grenade that burned extremely hot. You did not want to get around Willie Pete when it was going off because it was massive stuff. C4 was explosives. You could make it explosives out of it. It was plastic. You took a blasting cap in it. But it was also, they found out early on that it really, if you take a little pinch of it, it really burned really hot, really fast. So that's how you could heat up your C rations. But you want to make sure you only use a little pinch of it, because if you don't, the can could disappear. Now, I was mentioning a while ago to Amnon, tracers. Tracers that were put in for different reasons. It's like every fifth or sixth or seventh bullet glowed. And for some reason or another, we always used the red tracers, and it seemed like the communists always used the green tracers. I'm not certain whose job it was to stand and decide who was to use what color, but we were somewhat color-coded. To think about it, though, you have to remember, that red tracer, you can see where your bullets are going. But the problem is the bad guys that you're shooting at can see where the bullets are coming from. So sometimes you guys would put it in their clips down to about from the second or third from the last bullet, so that when that tracer went off, they knew it was time to start reaching for a new clip. But that was it's awesome if you can see from the picture to see in the firefight just all the lines going different ways and so forth. And the next thing is probably the most dangerous thing in Vietnam. Actually, it's probably the most dangerous thing there is in the military. That is a Butterbar or second lieutenant. The most dangerous thing in the military is a second lieutenant with a map and a compass, because most of them have no clue whatsoever what they're doing or where they're going if they got that compass. But just because he was a second lieutenant does not mean he knew what he was doing. A good second lieutenant would always listen to the sergeant who had been in the military for a while or had been in country for a while. The sergeant may not be any older than he is, but if he's been in 6 months, been in Vietnam 6 months, and the Butterbar got that yesterday, if the Butterbar is smart, then he would probably listen to the sergeant. A full bird, that's a full colonel, had the bird up on his shoulders, and a light bird would be the lieutenant colonel. It was hard to tell with the camouflage, with the black camouflage, whether the guy was a lieutenant colonel or a major, because when they made it black, both of them are clover leaves, and they looked the same. You just said sir, you didn't call him necessarily by the rank unless you knew who he was. A ring knocker, these were the guys who graduated from West Point or whatever. They thought that sometimes they thought they were God's gift to the military. Not all of them. There's some great people come out of the military academies. Just happened to work with a lady that's she's a West Point graduate, just as nice and sweet as she can be. But sometimes they wear that ring and they know everything. I mean, you can't tell them anything. It's kind of like having a young child who knows everything. And of course, you had the 90-Day Wonder. That's the second lieutenant who graduated from OCS. I was offered a chance to go to OCS, and I got to thinking, why would I want to be a second lieutenant in Vietnam? And I didn't, because they quite often got shot from either side. What's a mud marine? Well, that's basically the same thing as an infantry guy in the Army. Brass was any officer, because he would wore the brass insignias and so forth, which was later changed to all camouflage. When I got there, we used the regular green uniforms with the white name tag on them and so forth that were really shining in the dark so the guys could see you better when they were shooting at you. And then they went into the camouflage stuff and the jungle fatigues and so forth. A lifer, that's basically anybody who re-upped or was going to make the military their profession. There was a USA, which was United States, basically the USA or U.S. Soldier was the drafted soldier. The RA was the regular Army. That was the guy who joined. Wasn't necessarily going to be a career or a lifer, but he joined the Army, was an RA. I always hated when we had to haul out our serial numbers and so forth to say RA, because when I got to Vietnam, I felt like I was an idiot for joining to go there. But what's the top? That's the in Army or Marine top sergeant, first sergeant. That's basically the guy who runs the military. was the first sergeant. A non-com was any non-commissioned officer sergeant. And if you were a medic or whatever, everybody called you doc. Now, the Marines did not have their own doctors. They used Navy corpsmen. So you could join the Navy to see the world and get sent off to corpsman school, and all of a sudden you're out with the Marines instead of on a boat. I bet that was a surprise to some of them. Who's the honcho or the head honcho? That's the one in charge. Shake and bake. Joe Harsh, that I mentioned a while ago, he was a shake and bake. He was a guy who went to NCO school and come out as a sergeant. I think that was usually. I think they come out about E5, which is the start of sergeant, and they moved on up. A Mustang was a naval officer who came up through the ranks. He didn't go to the Naval Academy or whatever. He was promoted up through the ranks. And, of course, there's the Cherry, the Newbie, the FNG. That's the guy who just got in the country. If he was an infantry, he was the Cherry until they got in his first combat. And after that, he was no longer a Cherry, and he was looked upon as somewhat looked down on after a while, because you mentioned a while ago that you could get killed or whatever, and or in the process of that, getting some of the guys who'd been there for a while as the Cherries. So they didn't want to make a whole lot of friends with the Cherries or the Newbies or the FNGs, because you might get killed very soon. Of course, a squid is anybody that was in the Navy. A round eye, if it was a woman and it was a non-Asian woman, Caucasian, it was a round eye. Everybody talked about the round eyes. Once in a while, you see a nurse or a USO or a woman over there who was maybe in the military, Air Force, or whatever. But it was really quite pleasing to actually see a round eye once in a while. You didn't see many of them, but it was nice to see a round eye from time to time. It just made you feel like you're a little bit closer back home to see a round eye. Now, RTO, that's the radio telephone operator. I don't know how much telephone you want to think about it, but it was the guy who had that radio on his back, who walked all around behind the lieutenant. It was easy to spot because a lot of times he had that way tall antenna, and the lieutenant was right next to him. And so if you're going to shoot two guys and you want to get the officer first, you shoot the guy that's reaching for the phone, and then you got to shoot the guy with the big antenna, and that way you cut off all communications with the company. Rough Puff, that was one of the names we called the regional and personal provisional forces. That's the went in and recruited the people in the village, give them some rudimentary training, hold a rifle. The rifle may have been left over from World War I or worse, and you try to teach them which end of the rifle to point, and you call them Rough Puffs, and they would actually serve with their families right there in the village and so forth. An ARVN, that's Republic of Vietnam, an ARVN soldier. Basically was any member of the South Vietnamese military. He could have been a Ranger, he could have been a Marine, but it was all looked at as being an ARVN. And John Wayne, for you younger people, John Wayne was a movie star who was probably a big-time patriot. He made all kinds of war movies and so forth. But John Wayne was the guy who went out there, was gung-ho. He'd stand up and start shooting and exposing himself. And you want to stay away from the John Waynes because they won't get you killed. Now, some of these things I'm going over, we might hit again when I was putting this together, because some of the things are kind of used in different ways. The Kit Carson Scout, that was the former VC. That was the Vietnamese communist, or the NVA for that matter, but usually the Vietnamese communists, who switched sides. In other words, they decided to start fighting for the Americans in the South Vietnamese, and basically they went to training for a little while, and then they would go lead the American soldiers. There were some really good, and then there were some who really were not switched over. They may lead you into an ambush or whatever. And when you went out with Kit Carson Scouts, you always had to be real careful whether they were good guys or bad guys, because through the Chuhoi program was what they went over with, and I'm going to go into that a little bit more in just a couple minutes. LRRP and LRRP, Joe Harsh, as I mentioned several times, he was a long-range reconnaissance patrol guy. That's usually when a small unit of people went out by helicopter, usually early in the morning or late in the afternoon, were dropped off, and their idea was to stay out there and check out where the bad guys were. They didn't want to get into a firefight or anything with the bad guys because there may be 5 or 6 of them, and there may be 200 of the bad guys. So they have to stay out there and be real quiet while they go by, and then they radio in. They could radio in that people were there, or they could call in artillery. The only problem is if they call in artillery on a unit, they pretty much knew there was a LRRP unit close by or somebody close by. Our next one is Donut Dolly. The USO, the Red Cross girls would go out, and those were pretty hardy girls. They would go out to base camps to see the guys out there, play games, play music, sing, basically give the guys out in the field, on the boonies, and the fire bases and so forth, an opportunity to see a round eye. And now, all Red Cross girls who out there were not Donut Dollies. Red Cross had people working in hospitals. They had people in base camps and so forth. But Donut Dollies was what we basically called all of them out there. And of course, the ROK, the Republic of Korean soldiers, they were pretty tough soldiers. The communists were pretty scared of them. They didn't take a whole lot of prisoners, and when they did. Now I want to take just a second and have you to, if you have any questions or whatever, or comments, give us a call at 919-518-9773 or Computers TK Voice on Skype, and type in your questions. Be part of the show. Don't make me do all the work, and love to have you come in and your comments and so forth. While we're waiting for you to call, RHIP, rank has its privileges, and boy does rank have its privileges. My colonel, I was in engineers. My colonel had a fully lit tennis court right next to his trailer, and he had a trailer. You got to go, depending on how you got in line, whether you got in line at the mess hall, how soon you got to eat, because if you had the rank, you got in front of the line. If somebody got killed, you could say they bought the farm. And then one of mine, I actually used this before I went to Vietnam. If it's good enough for government work, you go out there and do a job. It's not quite up to par, but it's good enough for government work because, they don't have a whole lot of, the standards are kind of loose there. 86 or 86 is get rid of. Basically, I use that all the time when I go to a restaurant and I order something that's got sour cream on them. I tell them 86 is sour cream because I don't like it. Frag or fragging. Now, I have never met anybody who knows anybody that was involved in fragging. But fragging did go on, but not as much as sometimes you would think about. Sometimes you had one of those second lieutenants or a sergeant who was a real bad Marine, and they would send you off or give you things to do or things that could get you killed and so forth. And sometimes when they were like in their tent or whatever, in the hooch by themselves, a fragmentation grenade was thrown in and wounded them or sometimes killed them. So they have to either wounded, they have to go back to and be replaced. If you had a lieutenant, a second lieutenant who wouldn't listen, who sent you out and he was playing John Wayne, there's a good chance he may get fragged. And like I said, it was I knew it happened. I don't know of anybody it happened to, but it did happen. Halo, that's like jumping out of an airplane with totally no sense. You jump out of an airplane real high, and then you keep up with the time until you get low. Then you pull the ripcord and open the parachute. That way you could fly high so that they don't hear the airplane and know you're coming in. So then you jump out. Usually going to have oxygen mask on, helmet and so forth because you're pretty high and it's also cold until you get real low, and then you just pull the ripcord before you hit the ground, supposedly. And you get a bunch of guys together. We used to play Jungle Rules volleyball over there, which means there were no rules. Somebody might come along and say, "What are y'all grab assing about?" That's basically get out there and wrestling or carrying on and shoving. And basically, if we played football or volleyball, that's what it ended up being as a grab-ass episode. AO is your area operation. When you went out, you were assigned to, your unit was assigned to an area of operation. So you worked in that area. You may have been assigned to a different area of operation later, but that's where that you went out and did your thing, be riding a grunt. And if you're getting ready to leave, you got orders to pull out of that area. Somebody might tell you to unask the AO. In other words, get out of there as soon as possible. It may be a large unit's coming in, and you're a small unit, and you need to get out of there. Now, I love this one, 6P. Now, you can use this every day. Prior planning prevents poor performance. In other words, if you plan ahead and got a plan and work that plan, you get a whole lot better results. Yes, piss poor, yeah. Freak 25, I mentioned a while ago about the RTO. That was the radio they carried on their back with the high antenna. They also had a short antenna they used most of the time, and they put the other. The grease gun, sometimes we got very selective over there with our with getting weapons. So you could, a black market, you could just buy anything over there. One of the guys that I used to go out with driving a Jeep was a driver for my major, and his driver always carried this Thompson. Used 45 caliber bullets, and it was very easy to hold and shot pretty well. Somewhat like the AK-47, it put down a lot of bullets and it wasn't much for aiming. The K-bar, that was your fighting knife that quite often they would turn it up, tape it upside down on your harness so that all you had to do was pull it out down to the bottom and so forth. And of course, everybody's heard about midnight requisition. It was amazing how things that you would need something. Maybe you needed a Jeep for a short period of time. The midnight requisition, it wasn't stealing. You would just barn it for a while. Chances are, you may, when you left, when you came back to the world, that Jeep that you midnight requisition or that machine gun that your group needed real bad, that was midnight requisition, was still there. Of course, everybody has kitchen police. That's the guys that worked in the mess halls and so forth. Now, in Vietnam, most of the time we had Papasan and Mamasan worked in the mess halls, except during Tet when I was at Long Binh, because they were not letting any Vietnamese personnel come on the base during Tet. So we again served KP over there. You could be serving food, cooking food, washing dishes, scrubbing floors, peeling potatoes, or whatever. The 5 o'clock follies, that was always interesting. A lot of the press who were reporting on the war never left Saigon. They would sit in the bars, drink a beer, maybe buy a few Saigon teas. But every day about 5 o'clock or so, they'd go over to the military headquarters for their the 5 o'clock follies, which was when they got the news of what was going on. In other words, whatever the military decided they were going to report to them that day, that's the news, how they got their news. Dog and Pony Show, that goes back to somewhat the 5 o'clock follies. Some people call this a Dog and Pony Show. Basically, it's doing something for the brass, military, with the public, explaining things to them, just showing them PowerPoints or whatever. Same. That's doing the same thing over and over again. Same, or same as. Friendly fire. Now, friendly fire ain't friendly, I can tell you. Friendly fire is when you're shot at or shot or more artillery rounds comes in or bomb dropped, and it's by your guys accidentally. If you saw the movie, we were soldiers once and young. They had friendly fire of the napalm bombs coming in and burn a bunch of the guys there at the Adrang Valley. It ain't friendly, but you're just as dead whether it's friendly fire or other fire, but it does happen. But you're as dead just as much as you were from the bad guys. SOS, or shit on the shingle, chopped beef. SNR, search and rescue. Now, that was the word we used early on. You go out for, search and rescue. You go out, helicopters down, you go out and search for them and try to rescue them. Bug juice. You see a lot of times with a guy wearing his helmet, he's got that strap around his helmet, he's got a little bottle of something on there. That was for the mosquitoes and also helped with the leeches. The mosquitoes were unbelievable. They were about the size of good-sized hummingbirds over there. They were also good for leeches because they would you couldn't pull the leech off. What we used to do was take some tape and tape our pant legs to our boots and then saturate our trousers, our pants down around the cuffs with the bug juice, trying to keep the leeches and so forth off. Alpha Bravo, that's an ambush. If you were involved in Alpha Bravo, you hope to be the one initiating it and not receiving. Ash and trash. When a helicopter was taking off, they may ask him if it was an ash and trash run. If it was ash and trash, it was basically taking supplies out or mail out to a base camp rather than men. And, of course, the famous KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And that's another good rule for the day. Of course, re-up to that's to re-enlist. Shit can, file 13, dig 6, round file. Basically, that's to throw something in the trash can. 0 dark 30. I'm not certain if it's got an actual hour on 0 dark 30, but it's any time, I would say, from 4 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock. Maybe, well, I'd say 6. In other words, it's too damn early to get up and be doing things, but a lot of things went on at 0 dark 30. Ambushes, getting set up, and so forth. It behoove you, if you're going to have to get up at 0 dark 30, it would behoove you to get some sleep. Go to bed early. Behoove you to finish. If you were given an assignment, and it would behoove you to get that assignment done before you get your butt chewed. Now, a good straight soldier was squared away. Back in the base camps, we had to wear starch uniforms, spit shine shoes, and shiny brass. And a good squared away soldier kept his hair cut sharp and so forth. You definitely stood out if you were squared away. Now, if you were going out and you wanted to borrow some money from somebody, they tell you, well, I'll loan you $5, but you pay me back $10 on payday. I can't think they call that predatory lending today. And but you did what you needed to do sometimes to get some money. Now, Mad Minute. Sometimes you would do a Mad Minute just because you did. If you're out in a base camp and so forth, or out in the boonies, and everybody gets together and all of a sudden fires out in a certain direction, or it may be all around you. If you kind of make you a circle and you shoot just as fast and hard as you can, does two things. One, if there's somebody sneaking up on you, they can pretty much find them. And also, if you've been out there all night on an ambush and nothing happened, but you want to make sure you clear your weapon or weapon hadn't jammed, a Mad Minute's a good way to do it. You just start firing a couple of clips just as fast as you can go. I guarantee if there's anybody out there, you may very well get them, or they're going to hit the ground. They're not going to be standing around. Pucker Factory. Oh, that's when you get scared enough that the rear end just kind of puckers together. I remember the week of Tet, I was driving a Jeep through Saigon in one of the circles, and a Vietnamese cab came flying around and almost hit me when it was right beside me. The tire blew, and all that seat's probably still got the pucker in it because I thought somebody had thrown a bomb in the Jeep. Well, that's all the explanation of Pucker Factory. Boondoggle. Any military operation that has been not completely thought through, and basically when you come down to it, I don't care how good a plan is, when that first bullet flies, all plans go out the window. But some plans, if it's a good plan, you can adjust. If it's a bad plan, there ain't no adjustment to it. That's a boondoggle. And that was a bummer. You know, if you went out and all you saw was leeches and mosquitoes and so forth, and you were supposed to go out and ambush somebody and you didn't see anybody else, a bummer. Now, diddly-bopping along, that's when you're walking out there, going down a trail, which was not a good idea anyway, not paying attention. One of the worst movies I ever saw was it was claimed to be the black experience in Vietnam. It was terrible. It showed two guys high on marijuana walking down a trail near a POW camp singing, "I heard it through the grapevine." And that's what you call diddly-bopping. And wasted to get killed. Hewer, heard, understood, and acknowledged. You got orders coming on the radio, you heard them, you understood them, and you acknowledged it. Downrange was anywhere that you want. Out in the forward area. Boonies, that was basically anywhere but the base camps. That was out and another one was Indian country. You out there and surrounded by bad guys and jungles and so forth. Hooch, that was, we stayed in Hooches. When I first got to Vietnam, I was in tents. Then they built some buildings with Hooches. Or Hooch could also be a Vietnamese home out there. Scuttlebutt, the military lives on scuttlebutt. Most of it's wrong. In other words, rumors. Quite often, it's you can get a scuttlebutt, and most of the time it was not correct at all. The next one is pineapple, which was a grenade. The original grenade had chunks in it that looks like pineapple, so that when it went off, it would send out those chunks. But it was very hard to throw a pineapple. You kind of lobbed it. It was hard to get a handle on it. So somebody come up with a great idea to make them like baseballs, and which made them easier to throw. They had different grenades for different things. They had some with little pins in them, or machetes that were really mean. Anybody that was skate or sham was somebody who didn't do their job, just kind of laid off. Bohica. And if you were in the military, you really relate to this one. Bend over, here it comes again. It means that second lieutenant's probably got you another wonderful detail. High and tight, you got that haircut that they like you so much. And the dust off. Now, that's an unarmed Medevac helicopter coming in to pick up wounded. Those guys had brass you-know-whats because they were unarmed, and you be getting fire and lots of fire, and they come in and pick up your wounded or whatever, and they can't shoot back when they're getting shot at. And they got to land long enough for you to put the wounded guys on that plane and sit there and hold that cyclist stick and hold it still so you can put those people on. In the bush, that's anybody that's out in the boonies and so forth. Out in the boondocks, the same thing. You hump through the jungle. You get out there and spend your day walking through the jungle. File 13 is that imaginary file. And deuce and a half, a 2.5-ton truck. That's pretty easy to do. APC, or Armored Personnel Carrier. Every one I ever rode, we rode up on top. We very seldom ever got inside. That's a good place if you're going to sleep at night. Sometimes you go out there and sleep in. Own your six. If you hear somebody say they own your six, that means they got you covered. They got your rear. It's always good to have somebody on your six. Commo or com is communications. Grids. The maps are broke down into grids. In 1,000-meter squares. That's how you called in artillery or whatever and knew where you were. Check the grids. Somebody was gung-ho. That was like a John Wayne. Ho Chi Minh slippers. I think I've shown you a pair of those before on the show. They're made from tires. You can see Mission Rubber Plantation is all over Vietnam. So if you got Mission tires, the chances are that you've got socialist or communist-made tires. But they would take the old tires and cut them up and make shoes, and they'd wear them up and down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Free-fire zones. Free-fire zones were interesting. Somebody come up with a great idea. Let's take people from this area because we want to make sure when we shoot we don't kill the civilians. So they would take the whole village. They'd take their pigs, their children, their cows, everything, and move them 100 miles away and put them in a village over there. That means that anybody that's in that area now you can shoot at because it's a free fire zone. So anybody in that area, you know, if the Viet Cong or you see some movement in there. The only problem was that much of Vietnam is Buddhist, and Buddhists are very ancestor-oriented. Now, if your ancestors are buried at this village and they move you 200 miles or 100 miles to this other village, quite often those people came back to this village because that's where their ancestors were, and they want to be buried with their ancestors and also burn incense and worship their ancestors. So now they're in a free fire zone that's no longer safe like it was before. So free fire zones were a good idea, but it didn't always work the way they were supposed to work. Of course, the Ho Chi Minh Trail, let me tell you, the Ho Chi Minh Trail was not a one trail. The Ho Chi Minh Trail was a lot of different trails going in different directions, different areas. They would take trees and bend them over so you couldn't see the trails from airplanes going above. They had people who lived along the Ho Chi Minh Trail so that if we bombed the Ho Chi Minh Trail and things got messed up, they had people living right there to straighten out and redo the. It wasn't a paved space, but it was a nice and straighten it out and so forth. Hot LZ is any place that when your helicopters are coming in, they're shooting at you when you're coming in. Hot LZ. Firefight is any exchange of small arms. Fire base is when you take artillery and you take them out to an area. And the idea was you put artillery out on a fire base, so then you went out on patrols. Your area operation was within distance of the firing. So if you got out there and got in trouble, that artillery could shoot artillery out there to help you out. And of course, when your L-body fires at one time and the artillery hits the salvo, and we're going to have to saddle up and prepare to move out because we're running out of time. But I'm going to let you go ahead and we're going to go ahead and some more time. Okay. Search and destroy, I mentioned that a while ago. We changed that later on. They thought that wasn't PC. Search and destroy wasn't PC, so then they started going out to clearing an area rather than search and destroy, because destroying was not politically correct. Search and destroy just was not going to do it. Cache, if we went out and sometimes you found down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, they would stop every so often and put in medical supplies, rice, weapons, and so forth, a catch, and you could find them. WIA, wounded in action. KIA is killed in action. Crispy critters, when you got burned. Now, there were two words used in every sentence in Vietnam, just about. One of them was shit. You better get your shit together. That was some bad shit. And on like that. And then the FU word, that was in almost every sentence. It's, you know, when you're growing up, you learn to program or not program, but take a sentence and break it down into component parts. Well, those two words had to be almost in every sentence, so it wasn't a real complete sentence. It was like leaving out the verb or the noun or whatever. And it was used often and to great success. And a hamlet was basically a small village. And the thing about a hamlet was quite often those people had never been within a mile or two of where they grew up in that hamlet. That's when you started to move them around and start moving them 100 miles or so away. For the free fire zones, they end up coming back. The roam plow, that's an awesome piece of equipment. You go out there and clean out the jungles, especially at the base camp and so forth. I saw a guy, or met a guy not too long ago that was on one of these plows. He hit a 500-pound bomb that the Viet Cong had set up as a booby trap, and it messed up that bulldozer or roam plow quite a bit. I went out with the roam plow quite a bit when I was in the engineers. Headquarters, just what it says, HQ, that's where the headquarters were, and at headquarters usually behind the CO, the commanding officer. Measurements were usually done in clicks, measurements of distance, and so forth. Incoming, whenever you were in a base camp and those 122 millimeter rockets were coming in, or mortar rounds, somebody's going to start hollering. As soon as they hear that, whoop, which is usually a mortar round coming in, somebody's going to start hollering incoming, because it means they're firing at you. Another one you could hear quite often out there was gooks in the wire, gooks in the wire. Sometimes they would, sappers or the Vietnamese guys would sneak in at night and get through the wire, and when they got in a perimeter, inside your perimeter, coming through the wire, you'd holler gooks in the wire. That let the people know that the guy running at them may not be a good guy, he may be a bad guy with a satchel charge, going to blow you up or something. Indian country is basically any place in outside of a base camp in the jungles. Body count. In other wars, the United States had always took proper territory. You move up and take this hill, and you move up and take the next hill. But in Vietnam, we didn't do it that way. Well, you go out there and you fight today, and you may take this hill and whatever, but then you left, and then the bad guys will come back to it. So how could you keep up and tell if you're winning or losing? Well, another ingenious person came up with the word body count. If you kill more of them today than they killed you, then you won. But it didn't always work that way. Sometimes body counts got to be very, very interesting on how they were done. You may kill a water buffalo today, and what you did was you killed a communist transportation system. As I mentioned before, killed in action, wounded in action, killed in action, just what KIA, wounded in action. WW, walking wounded. You may still be able to fight, but they're not going to take you out by the helicopter. Body bag, that's the plastic bag they put you in if you were killed, so that the helicopter would pick you up whenever possible. Evac was, and when you're wounded, the helicopter would come in, the dust off would come in and evac you. If you got zapped, you were killed. And my favorite here is shit burning or shit burner. I was at Long Binh, had 55,000 troops, and didn't have a flush toilet anywhere, so somebody had to do it. And sometimes I would complain about being a shit burner, and somebody would say, "Well, you better quit complaining." And I'd say, "What are they going to do? Send me to Vietnam?" We use that quite often if you want to bitch and moan, and it's an important part of the military to bitch and moan about something. It's not a good, happy military unless you bitch and moan. And we used to say all the time, "What are they going to do? Send me to Vietnam?" Because that's where you were. And another one is, it don't mean nothing. Sometimes things went along that you didn't understand or you didn't like or whatever, and maybe your buddy got killed. And you're frustrated, and you don't know what else to do, and you just come down and say, "Well, it don't mean nothing." Or sometimes in a conversation, there it is. Let's just say that Amnon says, "Those leeches just about drank all my blood yesterday." And I might come back and say, "There it is." That's kind of agreeing with Lima Charlie. That's slang for loud and clear. Something when you call in the radio, how does it sound? Well, Lima Charlie. DAP, that was the African American or Black Americans had that handshake that could go on for 10 minutes. I mean, slap, bump, elbows, and everything else it was a greeting that they started using. The next one is the Chu-Hoi program. That's where the Kit Carson Scouts came from. It was the Open Arms program, where they encouraged the NVA and the Viet Cong to put down their weapons and come over to the South Vietnamese and American side. And what they would do is they take these Chu-Hoi pamphlets out there, and they fly airplanes over and drop them all over the Vietnam, where the communists were and so forth, by the thousands. I guess they were using them for toilet paper or whatever, because they've dumped so many of them out. But the idea was to tell them how great it was to come over. They'd pay them and make sure that they were taken care of and so forth. So that was the Chu-Hoi program. It was interesting. Again, if you were Kit Carson Scouts. The next one we're going to talk about is the Claymore mine. It's a great tool. But sometimes the enemy would come in like an ambush. You put claymores around, and they could come in real quiet, crawling through the jungles or whatever, and they turn the claymore around. If you notice right there, it says front towards your enemy. That's the front you want to have away from you, because those steel balls come out of that part. So sometimes the Viet Cong or the NVA, most of the Viet Cong sappers, would sneak up to the claymores and turn around backwards. Then when they attack and you clack that claymore, you just shot yourself. So you had to be real careful with those. Vietnam was first real use of the helicopter, the CAV or the Air Mobile group. Contact, if you were out and you come under fire, you said you received contact. CP was command post. You called in a helicopter, or the helicopter took you in. You were coming into the Z or the landing zone, LZ. If you were lit up, that means you were fired upon. You were out on patrol and you were lit up. They know that if we were lit up, you let people know that you were fired upon. LBJ, Long Binh Jail. named after Lyndon Baines Johnson, I guess. That's what we came to that. Anyway, it was at Long Bend Jail, and that was a pretty bad place. That's where the Americans who did crimes, maybe killed somebody or stole something, went to Long Bend Jail, and you did not want to be there because you were not treated the world. Yards were probably some of our best allies. They were like the American Indians when we got to Vietnam. And the Vietnamese people treated them bad, hated them, and mistreated them. So the Americans went into the yards and said, okay, how about fighting with us, and we'll give you weapons. And the South Vietnamese got real upset because they were scared if you give the yards, Montagnards, weapons, they would turn them against them. But the women were topless when we got there. The men were using crossbows, but they were the greatest allies and hard fighting people, wonderful people. Tunnels, you probably heard about the tunnels. Hooch was not the only place, but there was about 120 miles, 200 kilometers of tunnels under the place of Hooch, which had an American base there. And as you can see from the pictures, they had hospitals, they had kitchens. They had kitchens that you could have cook food, and the smoke may come out way off somewhere else where you wouldn't see. Sappers, those are the guys who would crawl in under the wire and with the explosives and so forth, or the guys who would crawl in and turn your claymores around. And the white mice was always kind of a joke. That was the policeman directing traffic or whatever, and South Vietnamese forces was they were always interesting. They weren't worth a whole lot. H&I, harassment, interdiction. Sometimes at night your artillery would just fire off rounds in a vicinity they thought maybe it was an area that could be bad guys in it. Now, they didn't know if anybody was there, whether it was good guys or bad guys, but you just pick an area and go, okay, you shoot some artillery out that way, just in case there's somebody walking around out there that shouldn't be. The DMZ was the McNamara Line, what was the division between North Vietnam and South Vietnam, a demilitarized zone. There was not supposed to be any real fighting there, and so forth. MPCs were the military payment certificates. We were not allowed to use American money there because of the black market. Somebody sent me $20 one time, and I was scared to death somebody was going to catch me with that real money. But they come up with MPCs, and every so often they change it because we weren't supposed to use the MPCs for buying stuff from the Vietnamese. We're supposed to use their piastres at all, but we did. So you could always tell when they were changing them because you'd see Mamasan and Papasan at the gates crying because they got a whole handful of MPCs, and once it changes color or whatever, that money is no more good. So they try to get you to exchange it for them. Guy could have $1,000 worth of MPCs, and the next day they're not worth anything besides start a fire. That's the reason they changed them around. And of course, the piastres was the Vietnamese money that we were supposed to use working with the Vietnamese, except they would accept anything just like they do today. Basically down to now the R&R, that's the rest and relaxation. That's when you could get an in-country R&R, get away from the field. A lot of times you were out in the field, you always out. You were either out in the field, you were on ambush, or you were humping it through the jungles and whatever. Wasn't a whole lot of rest, so they'd pull you back for a brief R&R at some of the camps like Vung Tau or China Beach, and also you were given 1 week off to go someplace. I went to Hawaii to meet my wife. Other places was Bangkok, Kuala Lumpur, different places that the soldiers went to. The unmarried ones usually went to places, and you can read what R&R was meant for as intoxication and intercourse. As a lot of the R&R centers end up being out of, in the Asian countries. And then finally, the Medal of Honor. It was created during the American Civil War, and you can read here that the Medal of Honors that were given. You relate back to 1978. There's been some since then, but not many men receive the Medal of Honor and still alive. It's mostly posthumously rewarded because somebody done something special, and that's pretty much our show tonight. We're going in January. We're going to have a man who was Armed Forces Vietnam Network. He worked with Pat Sajak of Wheel of Fortune. And if you saw the movie Good Morning Vietnam, which is Adrian Cronauer, he worked with Adrian. And I actually went to school with him. The first time I ever saw a TV in Vietnam, there was his ugly face. So he's going to be doing at least one show, probably 2 shows in January. And then we got some other exciting things coming up. Hope you have a great night and see a soldier over Christmas here. Thank a soldier. Think about the soldier and his family because they're missing Christmas. The men and women who serve this country and making it free for us may be missing Christmas all over the world. And thank you for tuning in.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, Health In with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, The Tanya Love Show, Your Healthy Pet with Gisela DiCarlo. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it at www.nissancommunications.com. Sponsored by Atomus.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters for professionals, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.